Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind. Let's watch and see what comes out of my face as I observe what's happening.
Just because we had a hiccup, things aren't going to be easy. And we had a...
So, I don't know about this, but with abusive people, we understand they minimize, and they will minimize at this phase of the cycle. They'll say, you're overreacting. It wasn't that big of a deal. All couples have this. My friends have the exact same thing, and you're making too much of a big deal of this. I don't understand why you're blowing this out of proportion. Why are you dwelling on the past? Now, for the psychopaths and the sadists, they're doing this volitionally. They're consciously trying to manipulate. For everyone else, for the vast majority of people, they're so desperate for the closeness, they will say anything, and they will believe it to some extent. And they'll say, essentially the message is, please don't leave me. And I will say anything to get you not to leave me because I need you so much. And that's a different kind of love. I talked about in another video about how people that present like this can be very intoxicating at first because they appreciate so much of the love, and they also idealize you quite a bit because of the splitting. And they will say that they love you, and it feels like they do, but it's not the same love as the sort of love that at least people in my circle would want. It's a neediness love. It's a desperate love. It's a love that is kind of one directional. Me and my wife, we love each other and depend on each other. But for these people, or people, I don't know about her, but people that present like this, they are loving from underneath. They feel like they don't matter in the world, and they're very desperate for a lot of, they want love to shower down on them. And this is why therapy, closeness, and attachment is good for this, because it basically is kind of that, right? The therapist doesn't ask the client to love them or to take care of them, hopefully. And so it's a good incubator, if you will, for this corrective experience so that they can be fulfilled in that way, so that they don't need that from their partners, and they can recover and have enough capacity to give. I mean, that's why mostly securely attached people can give, is because they've already received. The reason why I can give to my wife and to the internet and to my clients and to my students is because I have been given so much by my parents and by people around me, by my siblings, my friends, mentors and teachers that I've had. I was needy and they gave to me, and I was filled, and now I can give. I still am being given to, but I use a metaphor like of a tank. Like when I am being depleted, when I'm hurt or something, my tank goes down a little bit, but I don't need that much to get to full capacity of love and fulfillment. And when I'm at that level, I have the energy and the willpower and the stability and the emotional regulation to be able to give. But if you never had your tank filled, or it's just you're always on empty, and whenever you get a little bit, you quickly lose it, then you don't have the energy and the willpower to be able to give, to truly meet someone and really have a mutual taking care of. So it's a take, and so they're very needy in the way like a child would be needy of a parent, and they'll come across and they'll say I love you, and they'll be very oriented towards you, but it's not really mutual peer-to-peer love. It's more selfish in a way. It's not selfish, but it's more self-centered, I suppose. And it'll have all the look of something like, wow, there's so much energy coming towards me, and I feel so secure in this relationship because they need me so much. And you can trick yourself into thinking that it's love, but it's not. They're loving a vision of you, an object. They're loving a projection. They're loving what they hope to be an all-loving, all-caring, all-stable God or parent or superior or something. And for people who worry about ever being loved themselves in a different way, this can be very appealing because they try to get love in other ways and it never seems to work or feel deep, satisfying. To just be showered with this amount of love, it can feel very good. And so, I think there's a risk of that happening here.
That's not our character. It's not how we were. Drinking is not healthy, and talking about our feelings in that circumstance, that was not okay. And I'm completely aware of that.
Okay, so normally, if I heard that, I would stopped on a weird frame there. And I would say, okay, well, maybe if you just limit your drinking, or when you drink, you don't talk about your relationship, maybe that'll work. I don't think that would work anyway, but normally I might think, let's give it a shot. That would mean that when she's sober, which presumably she is here, she would be able to look back and say, I was completely out of my mind, or I was completely off base. She has not said that at all. She just said delivery. She stands by everything she did, at least at this point. Maybe she apologized later, but she hasn't yet. So, and another element of this is that they have a really hard time apologizing, even in their own, outwardly, because, for narcissistic people, they have a hard time admitting they're wrong because their defensive structure is so dependent on them never being wrong and always being superior, because underneath that defensive structure is a vast sea of nothingness and inferiority that they need to overcompensate by tricking themselves and other people, because half of their energy is just trying to trick themselves that they're at the very least not inferior, and they're constantly feeling inferior and wondering if they're nothing. And so they overcompensate by telling themselves, oh no, I'm superior, I'm better than everybody, right? I'm better I'm not only just average, I'm better. And then they're signaling it to others because it reassures them when other people see them that way. And then for people with borderline, what they have underneath, typically is this fear that no one will ever love them, and that they're worthless and unlovable. And sometimes people with borderline will describe themselves as like just inherently disgusting or dirty or corrupted somehow. They'll feel both empty and also just riddled with evilness or with disgusting stuff. It's just in their bones. Because that's the way they were treated, and that was the conclusion they came to. And they might have literally even been told those things when they were being abused or given that message. Anyway, so for them, they have a defensive structure of being hypervigilant and assuming that abandonment will happen around the corner, and being very critical of others. They're trying to shape others to be good partners for them. For narcissistic people, even when all the evidence is pointing the direction that they made a mistake, they cannot admit it, even to themselves, because that will just put a large hole in their defensive structure, and they will fall straight into the nothingness. And I've seen it happen. It's a desperate act. It's not an act of people just being a jerk face, deciding to do it. It is an act of desperation. It causes a lot of harm in the world, but they're not doing it because they just want to get away with something. They're constantly running on a treadmill away from the monster, and they're not getting anywhere. And the running is just narcissistic supply. And as soon as they stop running and getting narcissistic supply, they fall on their ass and they're in the mouth of the monster. And so for people with borderline, what they're running from on the treadmill is away from abandonment and betrayal. And they're not getting really away from it, but all their effort of control and of criticism and hypervigilance and of, pursue distance or kind of stuff is along those lines. And so when they are acknowledging to themselves, maybe I did something wrong, then what they're worried about is when they admit that they did something wrong, it punches a hole in the defensive structure. And what they're worried about falling into is, and therefore it's true that no one will love me. If I made a mistake, then why am I even running on this treadmill? I might as well just jump into the monster's mouth. Now that's black and white thinking. It's actually the opposite. If they were able to admit, at the very least to themselves, but at best to their partners, that they did something wrong, because of course she did something wrong, because everyone does wrong things. The irony is that their relationship would be stronger, but that's not how it feels. It feels like, to the narcissistic person, if I have one flaw, then I am 100% flawed, and no one will love me, and everyone will be superior to me, and I'll be nothing. To the borderline person, if I admit I have one flaw, if I did one thing wrong, then that will truly mean that the battle is over and no one will ever love me, because I will be revealed for the flawed, horrible person that I was told and that I know that I am. And so they will not admit before treatment, before recovery, before insight, they will not admit that they did something wrong. So it's not because they're a jerk face. It's desperation.
But when things get tough, like, I need to know that you're not just gonna walk away from me.
Right. I'll stop yammering, but I just want to highlight it went faster than I realized it would, or predicted it would, that we're right back to criticizing him. He said, if you think I don't love you and you are talking about not wanting to be with me, I don't know if I want to be with you. He was only saying that in response to many things that she was saying and just straight up lying to him. Someone told me you were with Jess last night. I mean, that's a discreet, just straight up lie, right? I mean, unless that's true, but it appeared to me not. So, he was responding to her. He didn't just come out of the blue and say, like, I don't want to be with you.
Last week I went home during the middle of an argument, and I told myself I wasn't going to do that again. Mm-hmm. Like, I was proud of myself for not leaving when you were treating me that way.
It wasn't just me.
I know it goes both.
Yeah. Ugh. I'm not bashing her, but I can be in both shoes. And if I'm in his shoes, it's that nice voice, that tender voice, that vulnerable voice. But she has only defended herself and blamed him. The only thing she has said is that her delivery was bad. Maybe. That's all she has admitted to. And you could argue maybe she doesn't even really believe that. Maybe she was just saying that to be nice. And so he's getting into the actual event, and then she says, yeah, but she interrupts him. Let's rewind that.
To do that again. Mm-hmm. Like, I was proud of myself for not leaving when you were treating me that way.
It wasn't just me.
I know it goes both ways, but like,
I felt...
It doesn't go both ways. There are times when I will allow for that to be out there, even when it's like a 20-80% thing. This is in the realm of abuse. And even if he did a few things wrong, it doesn't matter. The pattern of coercive control, she literally said, you can't leave the house. You can't go out ever. That was how this whole thing started. You're not ever going to do that, even though you would have taken me with you if I wasn't tired or I wanted to go. Just all the things, I draw the line there. I'll give a lot of leeway for people if we're not in the abuse camp, but if we are, then no. Now, I don't know what's happening here exactly, but in real life, no. Like when I have couples that are in my office and one person is abusive, and some of you might, there are even clinicians that will say it's unethical to treat a couple when there is an abusive partner. That's simply not true. It can be, and it's not a matter of ethics per se, it's just a matter of the standard of practice or what's going to be helpful to the victim in particular. And if I take one case in which I would never see as a couple, you have an abusive partner who is not taking responsibility, is dangerous perhaps physically, has threatened with a gun, has guns in the house, has already gone down a road of gaslighting and control, has separated the victim from a lot of other people. Yeah, I wouldn't have that couple in my office. But as I've been talking about through all of this, is that there are many different types and gradations to abuse, contrary to what the internet will say. It's just like there's a binary. It's like you're either abusive or you're not. And there is a gray zone, but there's also like there's a spectrum in different types. And I'm not saying that violence is more severe necessarily. You can definitely have abuse that looks like this that can be very, very severe, if not more severe in a sense than violence, because it gets into your head. So the reason why I wouldn't see a couple like that in my office is because I couldn't guarantee that I would get a clear account from the victim, because the perpetrator is sitting right there. Even if I met with the victim alone at times, I alternated, I wouldn't necessarily know. Plus the imminent nature of the danger is perhaps so dangerous that, because therapy will provoke things at times. You're not doing it on purpose, but the part of treatment for couples like this is that the victim is given a voice, a lot more of a voice than they've maybe ever had, but particularly in this relationship, and that is threatening to the perpetrator. And it also depends on the type of perpetrator. If it's like a psychopathic sadist perpetrator, then yeah, it's not going to work. But most people that are abusive are not. We don't assess them as having that disorder. So that's why we don't want to treat couples. But the general public and a lot of clinicians, they'll just in a sweeping way, they'll just say treating a couple that has abuse in it is unethical. It depends. So in this couple, at this phase, because we don't know where it'd be in 10 years, but with this couple, if what I'm seeing in the edit is accurate, I would characterize this as a form of abuse, and it has an abusive cycle. And I would also ask the question, if I saw them as a couple, would I be worried that he was going to be killed or seriously harmed physically if he was to say something, or the therapy were to challenge her some way that would trigger something in her and she would go after him? And based on what I'm seeing, which isn't enough information to make this decision anyway, I'm guessing that I would find with more information that I would not conclude that he was in that sort of serious danger. Is he in danger of continuing with this sort of abuse? Yeah, but not with the kinds of things we would be concerned for victims that would make it so that we would, step one, want the victim to actually be in a shelter or something. Okay. So with this couple, I imagine, it's not hard to imagine for you, that if I could work with both of them and slowly walk down the road, get a good enough relationship with her so that I wouldn't say she's abusive right off the bat, but I would, one, just build a relationship with her. And there's things I can do with people like her that aren't directly talking about abuse. Like I could say, let's work on both of your approach to apologies, for example. And then I would say, okay, let's start. What do you feel like you should be apologizing to your partner for? Or what would you like an apology for from your partner? And then I would walk through it. In my head, I'm thinking, she's the one that needs more work with that. But everyone needs work on that. And I could spend equal time, and there's going to be more growth for her, and there'll be some growth for him. But we're addressing the issue, and we move down the road. So there's a lot of things I can do that isn't saying you are abusive and you are a victim. Once I get that rapport, I will say that. I use the word abuse with people in my office because I want them to know this isn't just this minor issue. It's weighty, and the word abuse has weight, and I want them to feel that weight. In the same way that I have treated couples, married couples, who one person had raped their partner, and that word might not even be used by anyone in the couple, but I will use that word. Or I don't know, maybe sexual assault, depends, but I will use that word because I want the weight of it to be felt. I need to have a good enough relationship with them so that they don't blow out of therapy, and what good does that do, right? But that's the primary thing in therapy, is developing a relationship so that they trust me and feel that I have love for them, so that when I bring this up, it is out of love and not a judgment, but an observation. So with her, I would say that, and then, it'd be hard to swallow. Now, the victims are appreciative of that. like, oh, but they're also worried because, they love their partner and they don't want them to feel bad. But then the journey begins. It's hard. I've had clients, couples where one of the individuals was abusive, and it wouldn't be the topic every session, but let's say there's a transition period. Eventually, they adjust to the term abuse, the label abuse for themselves, and they go, "Yeah, I guess I am that way." And you know what? My mom was that way too, and so I guess it's not an excuse, but it's awful. I've had abusive clients, who are abusive to their partners, be some of the most moral, nicest, most self-aware people I've ever met. So that stereotype has to go. Certainly abusive people can be that way, but I've had abusive people who are, in the moment, they're not self-aware, but in therapy, they'll say, "Oh, I did it again. I'm so sorry I did it." They're capable of that. And if a therapist believes in them, then we can bring that out in them. We can emphasize that. And it takes a therapist that can believe in someone and love someone to get them to that place. Because it's based on rejection anyway and pain, the whole reason why it exists. And so if they don't feel the opposite, which is acceptance and love, then how are they supposed to come out of their shell anyway? So she might get to that place. It could take a long time, but even in that phase, it takes a long time where they continue to have cycles and triggers, and the victim continues to walk on eggshells. It's their choice, and I'll call it out, and I'll say, "Are you sure this is what you want to do?" And I'll meet individually and make sure they're not being like torn down without agency anyway. And then we could be in that phase for years while they continue to do things that are abusive in nature and regret it later before they finally kick the habit. It can take a long time. But the reason why I do couple therapy, why I use that modality, is that in my experience, for some situations, and of course, each individual might have their own individual therapist. There might even be an individual domestic violence treatment or something. But even without that, depending on the scenario, the rapid pace of therapy is, the speed is more rapid because the victim is right there. And if I am effective at bringing everyone to the table and making it safe for the victim to talk, then the perpetrator can't get lost in their own justifications. Because if they do, the victim will say, that's not what happened, or that's not how it felt, or yes, you've improved, but I still walk on eggshells. If I don't have access to that, then how am I supposed to know? Because typically in domestic violence treatment programs, these programs are for convicted criminals, people who have been charged and convicted of an assault of some sort, some domestic violence crime. And those are only brought to our attention when I did that kind of work. We did talk with the victims, but not very often, but we did. But after they were done with the treatment program, unless they got in trouble with the law again regarding domestic violence crime, then we didn't know. And so we might hope for the best, but if the victim's right there, plus I can treat the victim, because victims might not have just been victimized by their current partner. They might have been victimized several times in their life, and they have issues regarding their own self-esteem and their own self-worth and their own boundaries and their own agency. So I can help them with that. And I can do that in front of the perpetrator and watch the perpetrator watch us and go, "Oh, is that what's happening? Ugh, I don't want that to happen." Because people care. Most abusers have empathy. They have the capacity for empathy. And then for the victim to watch me talk with the perpetrator about the traumas that they went through and the emotions that they feel that generate the abusive cycle, for them to see that, like, "Oh, that's way different than I thought you just were a jerk face. I thought you were just controlling. I thought you just liked putting me down. You're still putting me down. You're still controlling me at times, but it's something from your past. I feel bad about that." Now we have to be careful because the victim shouldn't be sucked in to an abusive relationship that they would otherwise leave because they feel sorry for the perpetrator. That can happen sometimes, but I'm there to monitor it. And sometimes they do break up. Sometimes that's the best way for a victim to get out of a relationship, is for this model to happen in couple therapy. The victim does all this work. I'm working with them. They're watching me work, the perpetrator, working on communication. Things are shifting. Typically, at the very least, the abuse becomes heavily attenuated because they're coming to me every week, And over time, the victim grows and changes and learns and eventually says, you know what? I don't want to be in this relationship anymore. And I don't know if I could have got here if I just went to individual therapy and I told the therapist what I was going through, and the therapist just supported everything that I said. Now, maybe that is the model, and that certainly can work for sure, and I've done that work too, but there's something kind of magical about having everyone in the room. And they love each other, and what a wonderful thing if we could get the perpetrator to not perpetrate, and we could get the victim to no longer be a victim, and love will prevail. The original love can be retained and enhanced. That's the best of all worlds, in my view. That's why I became a couple and family therapist. That's how it was sold to me. I didn't know about couple and family therapy, and I was just going to become a counselor. And Paul David, my mentor, I did an interview with him. He was at the open house thing, and all of us are in the audience, and he's talking about couple and family therapists. They can work with individuals, and they can work with couples and families. And I thought, I don't want to be, I was having FOMO about couples and families. I was like, yeah, okay, individuals, but yeah, couples, I want to work with individuals. But I can also work with couples and families. That sounds exciting. The thing that because eventually I was in his shoes talking to prospective students. And when I tell you that us as couple and family therapists, we work with individuals, couples, and families. And if you join our program, you will be trained to do that. All of you will be terrified of that prospect because, talking with one person seems easier, and it is. So fear is rational. The difference is some of you will feel that fear and say, no, I don't want that. But some of you will feel that fear and go, ooh, well, that was me. It still is. All right, well, tune in next time when I continue watching. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.